Metallica began the 1990s already on top of the world. Despite an egregious and now infamous Grammy snub in 1989, Metallica's momentum was already so well built, the next album might as well have been certified platinum before it even hit shelves. But in truth, Metallica saw an opportunity to streamline their musical approach. They headed into one-on-one studios with producer Bob Rock in October of 1990 to work on their fifth record. Though some may beg to differ, it's clear the band tapped Bob Rock to expand their sound and cut some of the fat, not just to sell records. Though I'm sure they had no problem with capitalizing on their growing popularity. After all, the band were first made aware of Rock from his work on Motley Crue's hit record Dr. Feelgood, a band whose spirit signified everything they hated about rock in the 80s. The problem with Hetfield and Ulrich, Metallica's creative judge, jury, and executioners, is that the two were either unwilling or unable to take creative direction from anyone else. This kind of domineering grip on the writing and recording process had already proved to have damaging effects. Their previous effort, And Justice for All, was an intricate thrash metal album bordering on progressive. It was razor sharp in its bold-faced musical attack, but terribly boxed in from an arrangement and production standpoint. Of course, with Hetfield and Ulrich having final say on the mix, the efforts and contributions of then new bassist Jason Newsted were entirely inaudible. In addition, while touring in support of Justice, Metallica had noticed the crowd's dull reaction to some of their more winding and bloated cuts. Even a song like The Frayed Ends of Sanity wouldn't be played in its entirety until 2014, and that was due to a fan-voted setlist. Nevertheless, Metallica became aware of And Justice for All's fatal flaws and saw the opportunity to allow the creative input of an outside voice in producer Bob Rock. Their year in the studio with Rock was one that was marked by constant quarreling between the band and their new producer, but its completion proved extremely fruitful. Dubbed the Black Album, the 1991 eponymously titled release sold just over 500,000 copies in its first week on store shelves, and is currently at a sales figure of nearly 16.5 million sold. The simple earworm of Enter Sandman wasn't just a radio hit and a classic, it stands the test of time as being a staple song for beginner guitar players ever since. Truth be told, the album would have sold millions on Sandman alone, but subsequent singles, The Unforgiven, Nothing Else Matters, Wherever I May Roam, and Sad But True put Metallica over the edge as the new faces of the music world. Metal music was now a part of the mainstream, and even though Metallica's brand of metal at this time could be considered watered down by the standards of most metal diehards and early Metallica fans, there is no arguing that they had taken the world by storm and introduced a generation to metal music. The band were riding high and raking in tons of cash from their live shows, even performing for what is estimated to be over 1 million attendees in Moscow, Russia for the 1991 Monsters of Rock Festival. Though the show was headlined by AC/DC and opened by the Black Crowes and Pantera, this historic night will forever belong to Metallica for their incredible 10-song set. Not everything went so smoothly, however, as the band had embarked on a now infamous and terribly ill-fated co-headliner tour with Guns N' Roses in the summer of 1992. I'll make this relatively quick, as most of you have heard this story dozens of times by now. On August 8, 1992, in Montreal's Olympic Stadium, frontman James Hetfield stepped directly in the line of fire of stage pyrotechnics in the opening of their Ride the Lightning power ballad, Fade to Black, resulting in third-degree burns on his face, hands, arms, and legs. Hetfield was quickly rushed to the emergency room. With the Metallica set cut short, fans were of course disappointed, but eager to see the night's headliners Guns N' Roses save the day. The fans would wait for what was purported to be over 2 hours. When Guns N' Roses finally hit the stage, they played a meager 55-minute set before GNR frontman and notorious rock diva Axl Rose announced the premature end of the show. Axl and his crew partied backstage, and the chaos outside was sure to follow. Members of the frustrated audience rioted in and around the stadium, setting fires and flipping over cars, racking up damages in the hundreds of thousands. Interestingly, though the fans demanded a refund for GNR's half-hearted and underwhelming performance and set time, there was no contractual obligation to the promoter nor the band to honor any specific onstage duration. Metallica did soldier on, though, with guitar tech John Marshall stepping up on rhythm guitar duties, giving Hetfield the time to physically recuperate from his injuries while giving a less than energetic performance on lead vocals. I can't blame him. He was literally burned by scorching hot pyro, but it's unfortunate we never got to see him do more than just stand around with the mic to his face. One could imagine at this point the money was so good the band hadn't thought to stop touring, despite the clearly visible strain it had taken on members of the band. Let me really quickly show you a clip of the band debuting The Unforgiven during their Wherever We May Roam tour in the fall of 1991. Now here's the band near the end of their Nowhere Else to Roam tour in the summer of 1993. Whether or not this was just a bad day or a bout with the common cold is mostly irrelevant. Doing over 300 shows in 2 years is going to tax you mentally and physically to an extreme degree. Clearly, it was time for Metallica to get out of the touring headspace, rest up, and get back into a creative one. And while they did get a head start in April 1994, of course, the band couldn't help themselves but to do another, albeit much shorter, tour.
What color was Kurt Cobain's eyes? Blue! One blue this way, one blue that way.
Check this one out. What has 4 arms and 4 legs and works at McDonald's? The remaining members of Nirvana.
Why did you throw that at me? I have a question. Why did you throw that at me? I thought you guys want to throw shit? We'll walk off the stage, you can throw all the shit you want. We're here to play some music, not to fucking look out for crap like this, man.
Once the tour was done and dusted, Hetfield and Ulrich reconvened as they so often did to continue writing the Black Album's fiercely demanded follow-up. By early 1995, Hetfield and Ulrich had cooked up 13 new demo tracks, but the massive buildup of song and riff ideas that had been recorded in the 4 years since the release of the Black Album gave the two all the more reason to keep digging through riff tapes to turn into fully fleshed songs. This writing and demoing process took place in Ulrich's home studio dubbed The Dungeon in Marin County, California. By the end of this massive undertaking, they came out with 30 songs that were mostly mapped out and ready to take into the studio. Where Metallica's mindset for the Black Album was to create a more succinct, sonically powerful collection of tracks with a strong focus on groove and rhythm, their next album was going to take that idea even further, with the intent on creating something much more organic and much less rigid than anything previously released by the band. And the timing was right in their mind to do so. You can call this selling out if you'd like, but heavy metal had begun to gradually fall out of favor with music listeners in light of the smashing success of alternative artists like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and the Smashing Pumpkins. And whether it be a stroke of great timing or an intentional play for relevance, it would appear Metallica had no intention on reiterating any formula they had set on previous records. Hetfield had tapped in heavily to his bluesy, country roots, taking inspiration from the likes of Waylon Jennings and ZZ Top, while at times funneling it through the edge and grit of southern-flavored stoner rock gods Corrosion of Conformity. Lars at this time was hooked on Manchester Britpoppers Oasis and sought to bring some of those influences to the table in subtler ways to help balance some of the more heavy-handedness of the new record's hard rock biker bar stylings. Interestingly, while all of this creativity was bubbling under the surface, so too was conflict with their label of the previous 10 years, Elektra Records. By this point, Metallica had an incredible amount of sway in the recording industry, with Grammys won and millions upon millions of units sold, and thus felt it was time to restructure their record deal in a big way. This new proposal would waive personal advances from the label in favor of a profit-sharing agreement, making the band officially partners with the record label, as opposed to the traditional structure in which bands are contracted to the label. In this agreement, Metallica would make much more in terms of royalties and have much more power over creative and business matters than they ever had before. While the early outlook was bright for the band, these talks would be abruptly derailed after Elektra was taken over by Warner Music Group, resulting in the ousting of powerful ally of Metallica and longtime Elektra chairman Robert Krasnow. In late September of 1994, Metallica's lawyer filed suit against Elektra, citing a California law that was primarily used to free actors signed to stringent long-term deals with film studios. This statute allowed entertainers the freedom to be released from their contracts after 7 years. While the statute had been used as a threat by artists against their label, it had never before been taken to court in this way for the music industry. This groundbreaking case turned many ahead in the music world, as there was obvious potential that this case could set a precedent for any artist signed to a recording contract for over 7 years. Luckily for Warner and the industry at large, Lars, Metallica's management in Peter Mensch and Cliff Bernstein, and Warner Music president Doug Morris were able to come to a joint agreement. Ultimately, while all of the details of this agreement are to this day not completely disclosed, Metallica did get what they want in a significantly higher royalty rate and control over their master recordings, and matters were officially declared resolved on January 6, 1995. With the hell of record labels and lawyers in the rear view, Metallica would finally head into the studio with enough songs to fill an entire live show's duration to record their follow-up to the Black Album. Instead of returning to North Hollywood's one-on-one studios, the band opted to spend their recording time at the plant in the San Fran-adjacent Sausalito, California. Metallica also reached out for Bob Rock to return and produce the new record, to which he accepted, despite the band and producers' experience recording the Black Album, which could certainly be described as rife with conflict. It would seem that in hindsight, Metallica had realized a strong sense of respect for Rock as a producer who pushed the band to serve the songs as opposed to serving any one bandmate's sense of pride or ego. Rock's approach to recording on this new outing was far more open-ended and relaxed than the typically fastidious band had ever experienced. Instead of tightly scheduled and rigorous recording sessions, members of the band were encouraged to jam and rehearse together to create a spontaneous, loose, and organic feel to the songs. When Rock felt the band had gotten warmed up and comfortable, he would hit record. This is a process that is somewhat foreign to most hard rock or heavy metal musicians in the studio, whereas in most cases you warm up a bit, then work your ass off to get the right take in as little time as possible. Time is money, am I right? This level of freedom and flexibility of which Metallica had attained can truly only be afforded to big money makers at the top of their game. When you have millions to spend on recording an album, time is no object to you. And yet, surprisingly, the recording process took only 1 month longer to finish than the Black Album. But more on this later. At the plant, there was a stronger sense of experimentation within the band than they'd ever experienced before. This collection of material would be the first to be recorded strictly in E-flat tuning, which is a half step down from Metallica's usual E-standard tuning. Hammett had recorded many of his riff ideas in E-flat tuning in between trying to learn guitar solos from his favorite artists. Hetfield took a liking to this sound, and despite the fact that he very much enjoyed playing a whole step down from E-standard tuning, meaning D standard, he felt that tuning to D standard might make the record sound a bit too muddy. Nonetheless, the E-flat tuning had two notable bonuses for Hetfield, one being that E-flat was easier on his voice, and the second being that the bluesy, twangy string bends scattered throughout the new material were much easier to achieve with a lower tuning. In August of 1995, the band embarked on the three-show Escape from the Studio 95 tour, headlining twice in the UK, once at the Astoria, another at Donington Park, and a final show in Canada's Big Igloo. All three performances featured the live debut of brand new tracks 2x4 and Devil's Dance, as well as an instrumental jam of what would become Reload's Fixer. In November, James would be informed that his father, Virgil, was suffering from late-stage cancer and was expected to have only months left to live. Seeking solitude, a place to clear his thoughts, and a means to contemplate his past and the looming tragedy of his long-estranged father, Hetfield decided to embark on a hunting trip in Wyoming. On his trek through rain and snow, James, alone with his thoughts, began to form lyrical themes and ideas for the forthcoming material. Though he was not equipped with a writing utensil, Hetfield made use of lead-tipped bullets with which to pen these new lyrics. Upon his return to the Plant recording studio, he would find that his bandmates and producer had broken a cardinal unspoken rule of the Metallica recording process. In Hetfield's absence, Lars suggested that Kirk Hammett try to lay down some rhythm guitar tracks, a first in Metallica's recording history. While in the past, Hetfield would have likely seen this as a major violation of trust, cooler heads prevailed, and James was assured by Rock and the band that he had final say on whether Kirk's rhythm tracks could stay on the record. At first, Hetfield was not happy with what Hammett's rhythm tracks added to the album. After all, James was used to heading into the studio, recording upwards of 6 rhythm tracks all alone, and making them tight as possible. On the new material, he knew he wanted a looser, denser sound than what featured on the Black Album, but was unsure how to record rhythm tracks that felt distinctly different from one another. With time and subsequent listens, James eventually found Kirk's addition to the rhythm guitars to be what was needed to form the beefier, dirtier guitar sound that he sought. Metallica was creatively thriving at the Plant, but it began to seem as if the openness with which they explored their new compositions had begun to take a toll on their productivity. After all, managing the recording, mixing, and mastering of 27 songs is truly no easy feat, and every second that they spent working on one track meant that there were 26 others that were not receiving the proper attention. Clearly, the band had to come to grips with the fact that the workload they so eagerly embraced was a tad too daunting. With many songs only nearing completion, the original idea of a double album had to be scrapped, so that the quartet could focus their efforts on fleshing out material that they felt they could complete in a timely fashion. This, too, posed a songwriting dilemma in of itself. Metallica were not the type of band to scrap or shelve any written material. In fact, to this point in time, there was not one fully written song of theirs that did not make it on an official Metallica release. Unfortunately, this rigid mentality meant the band would force their way through songs that might have been better served as B-sides or bonus tracks. James makes mention of this years later during the making of 2003's Sane Anger, and it seems pretty telling.
When I hear Lars talk about we can whip anything into decent shape, I agree, and we did that on Load and Reload.
Yeah.
And this is us trying to choose before we take it to those extremes, you know?
Exactly.
Elektra Records had set the deadline for the mastering of the new album on May 1st, 1996, a full year apart from their first sessions for the record, and the official release date was now set for June 4th. The final recording and mixing sessions would now take place at Right Track Recording and Quad Recording in New York City. On March 9th, 1996, the rock magazine Kerrang! Released their 587th issue with an exclusive look at the new album. For one, Kerrang! Got straight to the point. Metallica's new release was a clear departure from the already more toned-down stylings of the Black Album. Beyond that, Kerrang published the very first photos of Metallica's new look. Gone were the raggedy long locks that were so intrinsically linked to the band's image for the last 15 years. Metallica, on pretty much day one of this change, were already forced to defend their new aesthetic. More on this later. In addition, it was also announced that Metallica were to join the hit alternative rock tour Lollapalooza for their 5th annual outing, starting on June 27th. Metallica's 6th studio publicly disagreed on the direction of the band. While James at the time found the shift in musical direction to be neatly organic for a more matured heavy metal band, Ulrich was quick to dismiss the label of heavy metal, yet cautious to accept the label of alternative. It would also appear that Lars and Kirk Hammett had a stronger sense of control over the image of the group, where the two had appeared to shed the visual immaturity of black leather vests and metal t-shirts with cut-off sleeves. Hetfield, while defensive at first of the new material on the album, was not fond of Hammett and Ulrich's focus on image, and began to accept that the band's new look had just as much, if not more, to do with alienating their fanbase than the southern rock and country-flavored approach to the new records. These were the subtle seeds of discordance planted, and they'd eventually sprout into full-on resentment between band members in the coming decade. Creatively, the output on Load is nothing short of daring, if not outright ballsy. An obvious decision from a music business perspective is to take the blueprint laid out on the Black Album and just rehash it for another 10 songs. For the band to continue to evolve further is a far more respectable move, and it's unfortunate just how many people did not see that. The fact of the matter is that Load is not weighed down by haircuts or fashion or money or country or bluesy southern rock. It's the lack of quality control that hampers its full potential. Load has strong, well-written songs, but at times it fails to stand out amongst a bevy of unimaginative filler tracks. As I stated earlier, it would have benefited the band greatly to calm down, think bigger picture, and try to compile their absolute best material and leave the rest as B-sides. While the fault for this lack of proper editing can absolutely be laid at the foot of the band, it was also a part of Bob Rock's responsibility as a producer to assist, guide, and even rein in the artistic vision of the record. In this sole aspect, Rock undoubtedly failed. On the positive side, Load soars in ways that Metallica had never reached before, and never reached since. Hetfield's vocals have never been stronger or more studied. Ulrich's laid-back approach to drumming on this release has much more swing and rhythmic weight than ever before. Jason's bass playing here is more nuanced and complementary than on the Black Album, and Hammett's rhythm guitar playing adds color and vibe that would sorely be missed without his contribution. Ultimately, Load was a financial success. However, it stood as a mark against the band's credibility. People that enjoyed Metallica's earlier work weren't exactly ready to embrace bluesy boogie rock with hints of alternative, and alternative fans, generally speaking, weren't exactly ready to embrace anything under the name of Metallica. With Load's strong press run, the release of singles and music videos, and the Lollapalooza tour behind them, more work was still yet to be done. And more touring, too. Metallica embarked on their new tour in promotion of Load, dubbed Poor Touring Me, a play on the song title Poor Twisted Me from the album. Poor Touring Me spanned across Europe and North America, lasting 139 shows from early September 1996 to late May 1997. Metallica on this tour filmed their 2 nights in Fort Worth, Texas, with a cleverly performed on-stage accident to add an air of excitement and intrigue to their live performance. This performance would release in 1998 on VHS and DVD as Cunning Stunts. After Poor Touring Me, there still remained 13 more songs from their recording sessions that were still yet to be completed. It was now time for the band to head right back into the plant in Sausalito to polish off the last of the 13 unfinished tracks first demoed in the Load sessions. The process went off without a hitch, and by November 18th, 1997, Reload hit store shelves. This record, like Load, was another instant chart topper, though it did sell a reduced 436,000 copies in its first week of release. In keeping with the transgressive visual aesthetic of Load, Reload's cover art features another piece by Andres Serrano, this time a fusion of cow's blood and the artist's urine. Unfortunately, all of the issues with Load seem to come back with a vengeance on Reload. One of the benefits of withholding material is that you can take into account some of the criticisms levied against your earlier work and revise based on some of the more constructive feedback you've received. Metallica could have easily weighed the positives and negatives of the material on Load and taken extra time to retool some of the new songs that might be missing the mark. However, this would have resulted in a delay of the record, which I'm sure was not even up for consideration by the band nor Elektra. Instead, Reload once more suffers from being too bloated an experience. Clocking in at 76 minutes, it's only 2 minutes shy of Load's gargantuan runtime. Though it is a more rock-based outing than its predecessor, and thusly should have been more well-received by Metallica's increasingly weary fan base, Reload in execution failed to adequately stand out from Load's more gutsy creative direction. While singles The Memory Remains and Fuel shine through as exceptional works in the discography, and deep cuts Low Man's Lyric and Fixer are as strong as any mid-period Metallica tracks, songs like Attitude and Bad Seed bog down the pacing of the album and feel less inspired than even some of the blandest songs on Load. In addition, Hetfield's vocals on this album tend to skew more nasally and whiny than the uber-powerful melodic approach he utilized beginning with the Black Album. James tends to sing this way live quite a bit in 1997, almost as if he is trying to mesh his masculine, intense vocals with the sound of singers like Billy Corgan or Lane Staley. But James is James, and this experimentation comes off as ill-conceived at best and insincere at worst. Furthermore, Lars's drumming starts to feel a bit too samey on Reload, as if the mellower songwriting led the drummer to run out of ideas for compelling fills and drum beats. That being said, Jason Newsted comes out of Reload as the MVP, if for nothing else, adding depth to songs like Devil's Dance that otherwise would not be as good without his groovy, weighty playing. In addition, Newsted gets another songwriting credit, his third and final in the band, with Where the Wild Things Are, a song that, while being a touch too long and too repetitive, is saved by the fact that the main hook is Jason's trippy, earworm bass riff. Fans and critics naturally saw Reload as a sister album to Load, which basically didn't do any favors in soothing the worry that Metallica might be running out of steam. While Load came off as a shock to many a listener, Reload sadly remains a footnote in Metallica's overarching discography. Fumbling what could have been an easy victory lap in Load and Reload, Metallica's next moves, despite being sound business decisions and being seemingly the easy route the band should have taken after the Black Album, signaled to many a sort of creative malaise or confusion on the part of the band. 1998's Garage Inc. was an all-covers double-disc celebration of the quartet's roots and influences, with its first disc a collection of brand new covers, and its second disc compiling every cover the band had previously recorded from 1984 to 1995. 1999 saw Metallica collaborate with composer Michael Kamen and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra on S&M, a live album featuring songs across their entire catalog, with 2 new tracks in Minus Human and No Leaf Clover. Metallica, while having indelibly etched their name in the record books as the world's most powerful heavy metal monster in the previous decade, had entered the 2000s on shakier grounds than expected. The previously mentioned albums all did well, but the fan base was beginning to grow increasingly worried that Metallica's last few outings were the result of an overly indulgent band with too much money and too much time on their hands. If everything a band does is an instant hit, how do they grow? If the mid-90s saw Metallica branch out into bluesy radio-friendly rock, Where would they, a former thrash metal band now heading into middle age, find their creative spark? What no one had expected in the turn of the millennium, least of all Metallica, is that the trials and tribulations that lay ahead for the band would test their ability to remain unified and dedicated to their legacy and life's work more than ever before.